Welcome to the Certitude of the Catholic Faith. I'm John Veneri, and this is a program where we've been going through the Catholic Catechism, the Catechism of Pope St. Pius X. And every now and then in this program we have a little diversion. We go somewhere else, often because something will have sparked the idea. And later on I'll tell you why we have gone, I won't say off track, but we're taking a different path today because I want to talk about something that I'm taking for granted that if you're watching this program, you're watching it because you're interested in Christianity, you're a Catholic yourself, or some member of some denomination, and that's why you're watching, or you're at least interested, or else you would have changed the channel a long time ago. But what I want to talk about today, what I want to focus on today, on the fact that the importance of Christianity in the world, we know of its importance, but Christianity is losing. It is losing big time. It is losing in practically every area of life because, as I've talked about in previous programs, what we have today is an onslaught of atheism. I might have said in a previous program that there's a report that says that 90% of biologists are atheists. Atheism is more the norm. It's the air we breathe. It is in entertainment. It's in the news media. It is just taken for granted that you might personally believe in God, but in the real world, he really doesn't matter. You pretty much do what you want. You, in a sense, are your own God, not in the sense that you can create things out of nothing, but that you yourself, or in the first person, I am the arbiter of right and wrong. I do what I think is right for me, and no one can tell me what to do. And all we have to do is make sure that we don't tread on each other's toes. If I'm a farmer and I only have one pig and you have 13 pigs, I just can't jump the fence and take your pig. Okay, so we have to have some laws in place that we don't tread on each other's toes, but basically the system is atheistic. Christianity is losing. Christ has no place in the marketplace, in government institutions, in social institutions. You're not allowed to utter his name. Now, there's a great priest named Father Dennis Fahey. He wrote a lot on the social kingship of Jesus Christ, and he gave probably the best definition of liberalism I've ever heard. He said, liberalism is the belief that there is any part of God's creation that is not subject to his domain. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Liberalism, it's a profound statement. Liberalism is the belief that there is any part of God's creation that is not subject to his domain. And I especially say this within the context of the modern state, because in nation after nation after nation throughout the world, it's the case in the United States, very much now with the growth of the EU, the European Union, it is an accepted principle that nations should be atheistic, should profess no religion, and just be thoroughly humanistic. Well, states, what's the definition of liberalism? The belief that there is any portion of God's creation that is not subject to his domain. Well, states, governments, and social institutions are part of God's creation, and as such, states, governments, and social institutions are part of God's domain, are subject to God's domain, are subject to God's laws, including the Ten Commandments. But what we have today is a secularized culture. This has been also a very definite plan of Freemasonry, very definite plan of communism. We'll talk about that in a different program. It's all there, especially in the 20th century, the work of a man named Antonio Gramsci, who pushed for a secularized society. But we see it everywhere. We see rabid, is the word I'm looking for, rabid immorality. People do what they want. The pop stars, the Hollywood movies. Things against, I won't go into detail, against the 6th and 9th commandments are glorified on screen. You do what you want. Grows out of the so-called sexual revolution of the 1960s and also situation ethics. We talked about that in previous program. rabid immorality. We have the breakdown of marriage. People getting divorced and remarried, divorced and remarriage. Record number of people living together out of wedlock. They just don't get involved with marriage at all. Contrary to the nature of man, which is marriage, and contrary to the law of Christ, who said that he who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery, and also that a man and woman have to be united if they want to do the acts that bring about children. It has to be under the veil of matrimony. We have record number of divorces. I mentioned that. What did our Lord say? He said that you'll know when the coming of the Son of Man is when you see that as it was in the days of Noah, when they are marrying and giving in marriage. Marrying and giving in marriage. This is the fabric of our culture right now, and if you speak against it, you're called all types of right-wing extremists and the whole bit. That's marriage. That's family life. We have this plague of abortion in the United States, where I live. 3,000 abortions per day. Per day. Planned Parenthood, the abortion, the international abortion industry in the United States, worldwide. In the United States, they boasted in their 2012 fiscal year, they killed 330,000 preborn American babies. 300, that's one baby murdered every 94 seconds. They boast of this. They love Barack Obama because Barack Obama is their champion. He protects and enables them. And also they give him plenty of campaign money. One hand washes the other. We have the disrespect of human life that comes from widespread atheism. The fact that if the old get too old, get too sick, whatever, that we can put them out of their misery. Oftentimes, we're putting them out of our misery, but put them out of their misery. In Belgium, just yesterday, in Belgium, the news came that Belgium allowed it euthanized, that's killed, two, deaf twins. There was these deaf twins. They were twins, they were deaf, they were about 45 years old, and they were going blind. And rather than live a miserable life, being deaf and blind, they said to the medical industry, we want you to kill us because we don't want to live this way. And Belgium allowed that to happen. Okay, that's suicide. It's the direct taking of their own lives. It's something we're not allowed to do, and it's something that will have repercussions because those type of right to die in various circumstances, as the world becomes more and more pagan, will become the duty to die. In the United States, we're not going to give a whole program of this type of litany of bad news, but I'm just setting it up. Barack Obama, the resident of the United States, he's mandated that Catholic institutions provide contraceptives and sterilization, and to provide this as legitimate preventive medical procedure. And if the Catholic institutions do not provide that, they will be hit with ruinous fines and will probably be driven out of business, as one commentator says, which is probably the idea behind it, to get Catholics out of the medical profession, to shut down the hospitals, shut down the orphanages, shut down the Catholic social services, to shut them down. So this is the evil we're facing. This is the anti-Christian ethos, social, what's the word I'm looking for? The whole social fabric has become anti-Christian, really manifesting itself in what is now called the legalization of same-sex marriage, that Bruce and Steve can marry each other and call it a marriage, that Brenda and Sally can marry each other, and their marriage is just as true and just as valid as a man and woman who get married, as what civilization has given us from the very beginning. This has tremendous repercussions. I see these very stupid things. Oh, you don't like same-sex marriage? Then don't do it. Don't want an abortion? Don't have one. it has repercussions beyond what happens to me. First of all, it's based on a false premise. They call it now, the media slogan and the homosexual activists, they call it marriage equality. In other words, you're not treating us equal. You can get married, you two can get married, but we two cannot get married. Therefore, we are being treated unequally. This is a form of discrimination. Okay, there's a big campaign behind this. A lot of strategizing go behind this. That's a program in itself. But Mark Grisanti, I don't expect you to know who he is. Mark Grisanti from Buffalo, New York, a supposed Catholic. When New York, quote unquote, legalized same-sex marriage, he voted in favor of it. And he made this statement that everybody, I won't say everybody, but the left-wing media and all these people praised, well, I would not like to deny the right. My wife and I are married, and I would not want to deny anyone the same right that my wife and I have in our marriage. Okay, big flaw in that statement, a huge flaw that only a few people have noticed and pointed out. They act as if homosexuals do not have the right to marry. That's not true. Homosexuals have always enjoyed the same rights as others to marry, the same right as others to marry someone of the opposite sex. That right has always been there. What this group is asking for is they're asking for a brand new right, a new so-called right that has never existed in Western civilization, from what I know in any civilization before, the so-called right to marry someone of the same sex. Now, you think, well, let people do it then. I mean, if they want to do it, they're living in their own world. No, it has repercussions. What happens to the priest when Sam and Bill come up and say, we want you to marry us? And he says, well, I can't. And they say, well, it's the law of the land. We're going to sue you. And this is what happens. Now, in New York, the churchmen were able to strike a deal, as it were, that the clergy of whatever denomination would be exempt from performing same-sex marriages. They wouldn't get in trouble for it. So they have conscience protection, okay? Well, guess what? The lay people, the people on the street, they do not have conscience protection. So what that means is that any person whose business has anything to do with marriage, if you are a bed and breakfast owner, if you rent tuxedos, if you do wedding cakes, if you're a musician, and you turn down, you say, I don't want to be involved with a so-called same-sex wedding, it's against everything I know of natural law, it's against my faith, they can say, you're discriminating against us, you're denying us our basic human right, and you can be sued and fined. Now, this is not just theoretical, this is happening. There is a Catholic couple in Vermont, who run a bed and breakfast. And a homosexual so-called same-sex couple wanted to rent the room for the night. And they said, sorry, we can't participate in this. We can't go along with this. They were sued. They had to spend all this time. This is a form of persecution from the so-called victimized homosexuals. Okay? Same thing happened with a cake decorator, I believe, in Colorado. It's one of the western states. Maybe it's Colorado. But two women wanted to have what they call a commitment ceremony, because same-sex marriage is not quote-unquote legal there yet. So they wanted to have a commitment ceremony. And the cake decorator said, I can't do it. You know, I mean, you just go somewhere else and have it done. These people would not go somewhere else and have it done. They sued the cake owner. Again, misery, fines, all of these things, a kind of persecution against Christians, against Catholics, who are just living by what the church and natural law has always taught. It has repercussions in the schools. Your children will be taught that same-sex marriage is a perfectly legitimate, legal right. And you can't discriminate. Your children will come home from school and say, well, sure, you know, my teacher, Sally, she's getting married to another teacher named Kathy, and we've all been invited to the wedding, and that's okay. And because we're taught in school that this is a basic human right. You will see what it does to education, you see what it does to your children. Our national cathedral in the United States is now going to perform same-sex weddings. This is the one when there's a great calamity in the United States or great events in the United States. It's an Anglican, it's a rather beautiful, big Anglican cathedral in Washington, D.C. They were going to perform that. Military chaplains now are going to have to perform these same-sex marriages. And Barack Obama, when they said, look, we need some conscience protection, we cannot go along with this, Barack Obama said, conscience protection is not necessary. You don't need this. You don't need this. Putting the screws to Christianity, putting the knife to Christianity, see? More and more we see this, and this is what launched this program, because just 2 days ago, I think it was the third Sunday in January of 2012, they're having this big same-sex controversy in Paris right now. They're on the edge of legalizing it. You know how many people showed up at the Eiffel Tower to protest same-sex marriage? 1 million. 1 million people showed up to protest, saying, no, marriage is between a man and a woman, and you cannot remake it. You don't have the authority to, you are not God. You don't have the authority to remake human nature. You know what the government said in the face of that? They said, too bad. We don't care how many people protest. We're going to do it anyway. We're going to do it anyway. This is a direct attack on Christianity. We have to fight back. We have to fight back, and we have to organize and fight back. And this show is going by very quickly, so I have to get to my topic of why I brought all this up. That in the first half of the 20th century, there was a man named Douglas Hyde, and we're going to get a little help from him. But when you hear his background, you might be surprised that myself, as a Catholic teacher, as a Catholic commentator, is going to be recommending Douglas Hyde. Because who was Douglas Hyde? Well, he was born in England in 1911, and he joined the Communist Party in 1928. He was a communist, an activist for 20 years. And also he became editor of the London Daily Worker. It was the communist newspaper in Great Britain. So what happened to him? Well, after all this work and all this time in the Communist Party, he left the party in 1948. He came to see that communism is not a true doctrine. It's a false doctrine from top to bottom. He converted to Catholicism. He came to be Catholic, and then he would spend the rest of it, or almost the rest of his life, lecturing, especially in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. That time, he went all around the world lecturing and telling people not only about the true nature of communism, but also he was talking about common sense principles and tactics that are legitimate principles and tactics that anyone can learn from. Now, of course, there are some principles of communism that we could never adopt, such as the lie is sacred. You purposely tell a lie to someone because of whatever you want to try to, what you want to try to promote. You lie. And that's part of the other evil principle of communism, that the end justifies the means. As long as you have a good end, you can do anything you want to get to it. Whereas we know from St. Paul, from Scripture, that we may not do evil so that good may come from it. Okay, those are some of the bad principles of communism. But he points this out. He says it's probably true, I'm reading him now, it's probably true to say of the communist that never in man's history has a small group of people set out to win a world and have achieved more in less time. Communism is a system of lies. We know that, but he asked the question, if it is a system of lies, then why is it that so many people became attracted to it? Now, I'm not talking about places like in Russia, okay, because in Russia, they enforce communism at the point of the gun. and they had all of these snitching things in place that you could even talk to your child without the Soviet leaders learning what you said and maybe taking you away in the middle of the night. All that coercion. I'm not talking about Russia, I'm talking about China. I'm talking about why, he'd asked, why does communism have an attraction for people in the United States, for people in Great Britain, in South America, in the Western countries? Now, Hyde had been a communist for 20 years, and this is very important. Hyde said that the first and foremost thing that made communism attractive to people was the dedication of the communists themselves. When you met these people who were 100%, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, committed to their cause. And that's what you would encounter in the United States. That's what you would encounter in Great Britain. And that's what attracts people. Dedication of the membership. You meet someone who's really dedicated to what they're doing, it's attractive. You want to find out, what is this thing? Now, Bishop Fulton J. Sheen once says that fire has two qualities, heat and light. And he said, unfortunately, well, he said it this way, we Catholics have the truth, the light, but oftentimes the enemy has the heat. The enemy has a passion and a dedication and a willingness to sacrifice for the cause that oftentimes Catholics lack. There was a French Catholic counter-revolutionary author. His name was Jean Houssaye. He wrote a book in 1966 called Action. And he said this. He said, you have to be orthodox in your thinking, yes, of course, but you also have to be orthodox in your actions. And here's what he means by that. He said, Houssaye says, there is no more subtle and heinous a perversion than a self-satisfied orthodoxy that's indifferent to whether truth is fruitful or whether evil is triumphant. A wholly cerebral, in other words, a wholly brainy, as it were, a wholly cerebral and speculative orthodoxy is not enough. To be really and vitally orthodox, one needs not only intellectual orthodoxy, but orthodoxy of the will. And this is manifested principally by normal readiness for both zeal and indignation. Okay, zeal to do the right thing, and indignation and the irascibility and the willingness to fight those things that are evil. In a certain sense, he's echoing Pope St. Pius X. Pope St. Pius X said that all the gain in Satan's reign is due to the easygoing weakness of Catholics. We just sit by and let it happen. We don't want to get involved. We don't want to make waves. We want to go along to get along. Cardinal Ottaviani, who had been head of the Vatican Holy Office throughout the time of Pius XII, great man, he said something similar. Very interesting quote. He says, the frequency and power of crime have blunted Christian sensibility, even, alas, among Christians. Not only as men, but as Christians, they do not react, do not leap to their feet. How can they feel themselves to be Christians if they are insensitive to the wounds which are being inflicted on Christianity? Then he says something quite fascinating. He says, life shows its existence by a sensation of pain, by a vivacity by which it reacts to a wound, by the promptness and vigor of the reaction. In the midst, however, of rottenness and decomposition, there is no reaction. Close quote. Okay? You slap a man, he's alive, he has the veracity, he slaps back, or at least he jumps out of the way, or he defends himself. You slap a corpse, there's no reaction. You stick a pin into a corpse, there's no reaction. You threaten a corpse with a knife, there's no reaction. And Cardinal Ottaviani is saying that this is one of the main principles of life. This sensation of pain, this vivacity, how it reacts to a wound, and when there is no life, there is no reaction. So this tells us something about Catholicism in our day, that all these attacks are going on that are out to prick us, to knife us, to kill us, and there is little or no reaction. So, in this battle, as members of the church militant, our Lord himself said that we have to be wise as serpents and guileless as doves. And Stephen Douglas Hyde wrote a book in 1966 called Dedication and Leadership, in which he gives good common sense principles. Now, keep in mind, they're principles that communism used, but they are good principles that anyone can use. They are good principles that communists happen to learn and incorporate. They're not technically communist principles, but they're very smart principles, because you have to remember, communism, Freemasonry, those of that nature, they played to win. They knew one rule of battle: win the battle. Now, communism, of course, would do all types of evil things as far as lies. I said, end justifies the means, trampling on people's legitimate rights, all these things. They would do that in order to further their doctrine and their cause, but also they used many legitimate methods that Catholics can learn from. Very wise, we have to be, as our Lord said, wise as serpents and guileless as doves. And I see we're out of time on this program, so please tune in next time, because we're going to get into detail of Douglas Hyde's book, Dedication and Leadership, and what we can learn from dedicated men and what we can see that can be accomplished by dedicated men who give themselves wholly to their cause. We'll see you next time.